Ladies and gentlemen, my name is City Councilor at Large Michael Flaherty, joined by my colleague, City Councilor Mark Siomo, Chair of Ways and Means. And we are here today to discuss docket 0517. And it's an order approving a petition for a special law regarding an act relative to the ownership and occupancy deadline for residential property exemptions in the city of Boston. This matter was sponsored by City Councilor Mark Siomo and referred to committee back on April the 5th. This matter is a home rule petition to amend the current ownership and occupancy deadline for residential property exemptions in the city of Boston. The home rule petition proposes to allow taxpayers who obtain their principal residence after January 1st and before July 1st to receive the residential exemption for the transfer year, as opposed to waiting a whole year and a half in order to receive the residential exemption. I'd like to acknowledge my colleague and congratulate his efforts, who sponsored this. That's Councilor Siomo. And also joining us from the city on behalf of the administration is our Commissioner, Ron Racca. Welcome, Ron. Any opening comments, Councilor Siomo?
Yeah, I just want to stop.
We're also joined by City Councilor Tim McCarthy as well.
I want to thank you for expediting this hearing and for all the work, Commissioner, that you worked with me on, and Christine behind us, and my own staff for coming up with something that I think will serve the entire city very well and encourage more home ownership and get the exemption to the people, especially first-time home buyers. You know, obviously we have values are going up tremendously. People are finding it hard to scrape together all the money necessary to put down, and closing costs, and any way that we can help them get into their home more easily, I think is a good thing. So I want to thank you, Commissioner, for helping me craft this and bring it forward, and hopefully get it through the legislature.
Thank you, Councilor. Commissioner, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Ron Rocco. I'm the Commissioner of the Assessing Department. Happy to be here today, and this is really kind of a reflection of a process that we started with Councilor Siomo really months ago, and trying to work through an issue that I think we've struggled with, for quite a while. The residential exemption that we have available today is great. I mean, it's one of those things that really helps, I think, keep taxes and the cost of home ownership down in the city of Boston. It keeps our tax rates very competitive. This year, with your help and some help from the legislature, we were able to increase the residential exemption amount to almost $2,400. So it's a really big tax benefit. But one of the things that has historically happened is that the qualification date for the residential exemption is January 1st, before the beginning of the fiscal year. And we've had taxpayers who purchase a property after that January 1st date, but before the beginning of the fiscal year, from a homeowner who wasn't previously receiving the residential exemption. They would not be able to apply for the exemption until the following fiscal year. So they basically have to go for a whole year. And in today's real estate environment, where it's really challenging, I think, for new homeowners to scrape up the dollars to buy a house or whatnot, the fact that you actually have to pay an extra $2,400 on your tax bill for a year isn't helpful for that situation. So what we were looking for is a solution where we could amend the general laws in a way that would allow us to let people, when they buy a property, to extend that effective date to July 1st, to the beginning of the fiscal year. So if you buy the property after January 1st, but before June 30th, we can include you in the process that we use to award new exemptions and apply for new exemptions. And therefore, the homeowners in those situations would be able to get the residential exemption a year earlier. So I think this is a win-win situation. I really like to thank the counselor, because he really kind of heard some of our concerns from a legal perspective and also from an administrative perspective. And we were able to structure this in a way where it allows us to have this additional batch of homeowners still go through our regular renewal and application process, which is helpful. So it'll help us manage the workload of that. And it also preserves the January 1st effective date for the exemption for all other homeowners. And that's very important too, because enforcement of the residential exemption is also important. We want to give this to people who are deserving of it, But we also want to make sure that taxpayers who are not deserving of the residential exemption are not receiving it. And we are able to use that. The January 1st date is the date that the income tax filing residency is also established for that. That is a great audit mechanism for us. So by preserving the January 1st date for everyone else, but using the July 1st date for the new homeowners, it was a neat way of balancing those two interests. So again, we think this is a great proposal. Look forward to working with you and getting it through the council and hopefully through the State House.
And you just touched on, I was just going to ask how it would dovetail with folks filing their taxes. Obviously, April 15th, the deadline, so be able to claim, I guess, any of the residential exemptions. Does that throw it off when you're allowing folks the opportunity to go from January 1st to June 30th? You sort of sit with your tax guy, and then you say, oh, geez, let's put in for the residential exemption. You know what I mean? So have you given that some thought?
Yeah, we have. I think, Councilor, I mean, the reason that the tax deadline and the tax date is important is the residential exemption defines residency as where you file your income taxes from. Okay, so that's why it's important for us to maintain that link for everyone else, because that way we can check every year to make sure that the residence that you're claiming the residential exemption is the same residence that you're filing your income taxes for, so that we're ensuring that it goes to the right person. But by using the July 1st date for just this batch of new homeowners, it allows us
My thought is just I want to make sure we're not creating a loophole for someone to say that they're they file their taxes, say they're a resident of somewhere else, they swoop in for the April 15th deadline, and then the next thing you know, they take advantage of this between.
Well,
that date.
we will be establishing just for the new homeowners, the effective date will be July 1st.
Okay.
So if you buy it on April 15th,
Gotcha.
we will be verifying that they lived there as of July 1st. So if you bought it and it takes you a week or a couple of months to do some renovations, but then you go in and occupy the property, you'll get the exemption. If you buy it and you're going to rent it out and you're never going to occupy the property, then you won't get it because you won't have established residency there by July 1st.
And the policy as it works now, what if someone's a day or 2 or 3 days late? Do you get many of those situations? In terms of folks filing?
Yeah, I mean, we do now. I mean, your heart goes out to somebody who buys a property on January 2nd, and therefore has to wait the whole time. This will certainly cure that problem. Unfortunately, I mean, there will be people who buy a property on July 3rd who will not benefit from the residential exemption until the next year.
Gotcha.
But at that point, every tax benefit, whether it be for property taxes or income taxes, they all have effective dates. And at this point, I think we're taking it all the way to when the fiscal year begins, which is a pretty extensive deadline. So there was always going to be somebody who's a day late, but I think we're really we're taking the amount of time to the extent of where it can reasonably go.
Okay. And then, not to digress, I just want to touch just very briefly on CPA, because I think you should be in the room. We're in the process, the council's in the process of forming, the ordinance around the CPC, which will be the Community Preservation Committee. We'll have, we had a hearing on it. We're going to have at least one, possibly 2 working sessions, but would like at least a consult from you, because at the end of the day, when those funds are coming in, I got to assume that they might be passing through you, or you have a unique vantage point with respect to those funds, and whether or not this has anything to do with that. I just want to make you aware of that between April and May, we're going to put together the CPC, the parameters around the CPC committee, and moving forward, clearly they'll be generated from CPA funds plus the match, and then moving forward. But if you didn't have any initial thoughts as to, or at least get an opportunity to look at the ordinance, we just want to make sure that it works for Boston. Clearly it passed on the ballot. Now we're charged with putting the CPC together, but I want to make sure that whatever we're doing, based on your professional opinion, makes sense, for the city, and given your acumen behind it.
I appreciate that, Counselor. I mean, I certainly have been working with my colleagues in the administration and particularly in the finance cabinet on the implementation of the CPA. And certainly, I mean, there's a lot of work involved just in terms of, working with our tax software and whatnot to get all those necessary calculations done, and we're certainly busy working on that now. But we'll be prepared and happy to do whatever we can to help you out with.
That'd be great. And then
your
at least we'll
process.
notice you on the working session, just to, at least you're in the loop. And if we need to call on you for some advice or at least get a good housekeeping stamp of approval as the assessor
Mhm.
moving forward. I think that's an important piece, making sure that whatever we're doing here, we're making sure we're doing it right.
I appreciate that.
Very good.
Thank you.
My colleagues have any questions of the commissioner this time?
Yeah,
Mr.
just a
Gilmore?
few. Again, thanks, Commissioner. I was maybe a little more aggressive in my first draft, but I see the benefit of what we're doing now. Not allowing for new homeowners or owner occupants in general to wait sometimes almost a year and a half, right? Sometimes 2 years. Sometimes people don't even realize it. So, one of the questions that I always ask is this going to require more staffing, more cost to the department?
Counselor, I think that we already have, we've done a lot in the way of automating the process. And when we send out the exemption applications, we have a workflow software that it all goes through. So we feel like we're already processing on average 2,000 to 3,000 applications a year. I think the additional workload from this shouldn't be that significant, and the fact that we will be able to, we send out applications for the residential exemption usually in August. So the timing of this is we're going to July 1st. We get recorded deeds a couple of days after that. So we will be able to include it in our normal workflow. There'll just be a few more. So, we've looked at the numbers and we feel like we can get this done within our existing resources.
Well, that's great news. And as far as applying for the exemption now, can you kind of just go through briefly the Cliff Notes version of how a homeowner gets notified that they possibly are eligible for this and how they can apply, and just walk through that real quick?
Sure. So the Reader's Digest version is anytime that there's a sale on a property and a new homeowner and it's a residential property, we get notification through the registry that sale has taken place. So all of those new owners, in August, we will compile all of those and we will send out applications to all those new homeowners for them to apply for the residential exemption. So in that application, they have to provide documentation that they are living in the property as their principal residence. And once they send that back to us, we go through our verification process. And the great thing is that if we approve it, we're able to apply the exemption to that third quarter tax bill. So that avoids them having to pay some additional taxes and then get a refund back later on. We get all our processing done before the third quarter bill is sent out. So they get the benefit of it then.
Right. And conversely, and during our meetings, we had several discussions about investors who basically inherit the residential exemption for a while. And I know we're still going to work on trying to address that in a better way, but, give us your, kind of the procedures you go through to address that issue.
So it's really the same process. It's that sale. So when that sale takes place, we actually remove the exemption from the property for the next year and require the new owner to reapply. So in your scenario, if it's an investor of the property, then they will not qualify for the exemption because they won't be able to demonstrate that they occupy the property as their principal residence. And so we will remove the exemption, and in the subsequent fiscal year, they will not receive it.
Right. And that is signed under the pains and penalties applied.
It's under the pains and penalties of perjury. And in addition to the documentation we ask for, we also have various audit techniques that we've developed over the years using databases that are available to us, all of which are very helpful for us in determining whether or not somebody actually lives at the property or not.
Right. And I know you are robust in your efforts in that area as well. And I think we also talked about what kind of clawback you have, and if you could speak to that a little.
Yeah, because that's an interesting issue because under current law, if we find after the exemption's already been granted that somebody has not lived in the property, there's no ability for us to remove the exemption under current law. So as part of the mayor's legislative package, we have filed legislation that would allow us to remove the exemption and reapply the tax. And in the case of a fraudulent application, we could actually go back up to 6 years and
Right.
recoup that exemption amount. So
Right.
again, it's important that this exemption has a purpose to reward owner occupants and home ownership in the city. But we want to make sure that it's only going to the people who truly deserve it and need to be able to
Right.
take steps to ensure that in cases where people are receiving it that shouldn't, we get the money back.
Right. And I think lastly, we don't expect to see a loss in revenue because of this. Obviously, we're extending the exemption, hopefully to more people early, or maybe not more people, but earlier to eligible people. Yeah.
That's an excellent point, Counselor. And again, one of the, I think the benefits of our working, this out ahead of time is that because we've established the July 1st date and can include these folks in our application process in the summer, we can get all of the applications processed before the third quarter bill is set. The tax rate is set with those exemptions built into it. So as a result, there is no loss of revenue to the city.
Right.
From
That's
doing
great. Just final statement, would love to continue the work on this issue, maybe providing more penalties for those folks. Again, what it takes for you to kind of go back 6 years, a lot of staff time. Maybe, if you catch someone and, you have that evidentiary documentation that says they've been taking this illegal, maybe we should just have a fine immediately and the clawback. But that's something we can talk about offline. And once again, I appreciate my colleagues joining me and the work that you've done with me and Christine and my staff. And hopefully we can get this up to the State House and on to the eligible homeowners of Boston. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Any follow-up questions? So it's pretty straightforward stuff, Ron, so I appreciate your time and attention to this matter, and hopefully we'll get this thing turned around, get a committee report issued, and have this before the council at the next formal session. So appreciate all your work and effort, and look forward to working with you throughout the budget process and when this gets implemented, after it gets up to Beacon Hill, and they recognize the wisdom behind it, hopefully get it turned around quick as we possibly can. So thank you, Commissioner, and that will conclude this hearing in the Committee on Government Operations. It's a home rule petition regarding ownership and occupancy deadline for residential property exemptions in the city of Boston. Docket 0517. This committee hearing is adjourned. Thank you.